This podcast is brought to you by Contessa Digital.
Hey loves, how about a little story time today? I want to tell you the story of a friend of mine who almost completely ruined her life because of a relationship that she got into. So, if this is your first time listening, welcome to the Confidently Cherished podcast. I'm your host, Keshia Rice, dating coach for ambitious women of faith. And this story happened some years ago, back when I had just graduated from college, but there's a trend that is currently happening on social media that reminded me of it. And we're going to talk about the story, but also this trend that I'm seeing, particularly on TikTok, and why it is so destructive. So, again, I graduated from college. I was friends with this girl that I went to school with, and we were living in Columbia, South Carolina. So for those of you who aren't familiar, it is the state capital of South Carolina, and it's a small city. So cost of living isn't that high. And I want to say that because someone who works in a field where they would be high earning, so let's just say someone who works in tech, doctor, lawyer, things like that. And there were a lot of men who have jobs like that because, again, it's a state capital, so you have a lot of activity going on. Those men don't have to make that much to be considered wealthy in a city like that, as opposed to living in New York City or Los Angeles, where, you know, a man would have to be a high 6-figure earner, if not a 7-figure earner, for anyone to consider him wealthy because the cost of living is so much higher, right? So, that in mind, my friend started dating this man, and she was just completely impressed with him, enthralled with him, happy to be in a relationship with him because of his status. And as usual, when I'm telling my stories, I'm keeping some details out because I don't want anyone involved in these stories to be identified. But, she was easily impressed, we'll say that, with the amount of money that he made and with the progression that he had made in his career. So they started dating for a while, and he ended up giving her an apartment. He told her that she could move into this apartment and that he would be paying the rent. He took care of all the furniture, that sort of thing. He set her up. And again, she was very happy with that, very pleased with that. And she moved into this apartment, was enjoying the life, not having to really work and pay bills and everything. And she had considered going back to school because the area that she majored in, she really needed a master's in order to be making real money. But because this man was taking such good care of her, she, at the very least, was putting off going back to school, possibly thinking about not going back at all. But at the very least, she was saying that it was something that she didn't have to worry about because, again, she was being taken care of. He had bought this apartment for her. He gave her money to take care of her needs and to allow her to go shopping and things like that. So she thought everything was great. This went on for a little over a year. And then the day came where she went out of town. She went to visit some family and friends. She was gone for a couple of days. She came back and her key to the apartment no longer worked. She could not get in at all. It turns out that this boyfriend of hers had decided that he liked another woman a little bit better. And because of that, he moved this other woman into the apartment because although she lived there, it was in his name. He was the one paying the bills and stuff on it. So he moved this other woman in, and my friend was left with basically the things that she had packed with her when she went on this trip to go back home. And that was it. Because, the furniture was all his. And not just that, but, the designer clothes that she wore, he paid for them and he claimed them back as his. The car that she had been driving was in his name, so he took that back as well. So she was left with no place to live and without a lot of the things that she had been enjoying, and also without really any career prospects as well, because remember, she had put off going back to school to get the credentials that she needed to really get a job in her field. Here's the reason why I'm telling you this story. There is a trend that I am seeing on TikTok, particularly. Like, I've seen some posts on Instagram and Facebook too, but especially on TikTok. And it is the trend of the stay-at-home girlfriend. And I get it. There's been this whole push, particularly in the past 2 years, of hypergamy, of soft life, of marrying up, getting someone to take care of you. And I'm not completely against all this messaging. I do believe that masculine energy is protector energy and provider energy. 100% stand by that. My problem is this. Protecting and providing is not all about money, for starters. When you are looking for a man, and, I'm talking to women who do want to be in a marriage and who do want to play the more feminine role in the marriage and be with someone who plays a more masculine role. So if it don't apply, let it fly. If I'm not talking to you, I'm not talking to you. But if I am talking to you, provision is not just financial. You should be looking for a partner who provides for you emotionally, who provides for you spiritually, who supports your faith and your relationship with faith and spirituality. You should be looking for someone who feels like a safe space for you, someone that you can depend on, someone that can hold your heart and hold space for your feelings and emotions and allow you to be vulnerable without them judging you. That is true provision. And I will say that when a man is committed to providing for you in those ways, then he also does his best financially. This is why I mentioned the whole income thing at the top of the story, because, I have seen women say, oh, well, I won't date a man who makes less than this. Any man I date has to make at least this amount of money, insert whatever amount of money you have seen on social media. And, there's two aspects to that. One, there is a matter of, if you want someone who is financially stable, he does need to make enough to be financially stable. But that can also wildly differ, If you're living in Los Angeles, for example, wanting a man to make six figures is not out of the ordinary, is not out of bounds, because the cost of living in a city like Los Angeles, you pretty much have to make that amount. Whereas if you're living in the middle of Iowa, not necessarily that much of a consideration. Like, you want somebody who's financially stable, but the income for financially stable is way less, probably a tenth of what Los Angeles is. But again, provision is not just about finances. And if a man is committed to providing for you emotionally, is committed to making you feel safe, he will also be financially stable before he commits to you, because he will do his best to make sure that you feel taken care of in every way. So, personal experience, I've dated men who make less money. I'm trying to think as I say this whether or not I want to say a certain amount, because again, we just talked about a location thing. But let's say this: I've dated men who've made an average income and who were very committed to making me feel loved, making me feel cherished by helping me out with bills, by giving gifts, things like that, by sacrificing, in order to make sure that I felt comfortable and safe and happy. And I have dated men who have made, multiple seven figures and were stingy AF. So, it's not just about the amount, although the amount is a consideration as far as stability goes, but it's also about whether or not that person, what their priorities are, whether or not they see investing money into a woman as a priority. But also, this whole thing with stay-at-home girlfriends bothers me for several other reasons. And I wrote down 4 of them that I really wanted to talk to you about. For starters, girlfriend is not a status. I know people like to think that girlfriend is a status, that it is proof of something, is proof of a commitment. Oh, we're serious, we're committed, we're in a relationship. We're officially boyfriend and girlfriend. This relationship is official. But girlfriend is not a status. I hear women talk all the time about how you are single until you're married. And I agree. I 100% agree with that. Not to say that you can't make the commitment to only date that one person, because you can. But you also have to remember that the only thing that is official is the thing that has government paperwork attached to it, and that is marriage. When you are in a girlfriend-boyfriend relationship with someone, it's just easier to leave it. Even if you're living together, even if you're cohabitating, it's still easier to leave that relationship than it is to leave a marriage, because a marriage, to end that, you have to do a divorce, and a divorce is a legal thing, and it's a time-consuming thing. It can be a very expensive thing. It just takes a lot more effort to break up a marriage. Whereas if you are dating someone, even if you are exclusive, even if you are committed, at any point in time, the person can still be like, peace out. And at the very most, if you're living together, it's a matter of them figuring out who takes over the lease and then moving to another place. And I hope that the story I told you illustrates that, because this friend of mine had a boyfriend who was taking very good care of her at that, a boyfriend who was paying all of her bills, a boyfriend who was giving her spending money. But at the end of the day, she was entertainment to him. And I don't say that as a knock on her, but the fact is, she was dealing with someone who made a lot of money in a low cost of living city and could easily afford to not only pay for pretty girls to be around him, but could also easily afford to ditch pretty girls and get another pretty girl at any given time, because what was it to him? So I want you to remember that girlfriend is not a status. So if you are a stay-at-home girlfriend to some man, at any given time, he can just decide that he's bored and move on. The other thing is my second point here: taking commitments too lightly. The purpose of dating someone is to get to know them and to use your discernment to decide if this is someone that you want to stay with long term. So I'm saying this one to you, whether you want to get married, or even if you never want to get married, but you want some type of Oprah and Stedman situation where, they've been together for what, at this point, 30, 40 something years. They live together. They are life partners. So even if you don't want to get married, but you do want to spend your life with someone, the purpose of dating is to discern whether or not you want to stay with this person, whether or not they have the aligned values, whether they have the personality, whether they have what it takes to be with you for the rest of your life. And because of that, being in a relationship with someone is not something that's meant to be taken lightly. It is something in which you should be thoughtful. You should be intentional. So it happens too often that women get in relationships with a man who is very generous at the start. He's given a lot of gifts. He's given a lot of compliments. And because she is overwhelmed with being love bombed, she will start dropping her boundaries and dropping her standards. So she gets caught up in constantly being complimented and will suddenly be willing to ignore the fact that he's not stable financially, mentally, whatever. He's not stable. She will get caught up in all the gifts and completely ignore the fact that he has already said he's not into commitment. He'll say things like, let's take it day by day. Let's see how this goes. I don't want to rush anything. He's constantly trying to put off whether or not he'd be willing to commit. You get caught up in the whirlwind and don't allow yourself to stay sober enough, because it is kind of a drunkenness, right? This whole idea of being drunk in love is a thing. You get so caught up in the whirlwind, you get so lightheaded that you stop thinking clearly and you stop listening to the things that this person is really saying. You stop paying attention to whether or not his actions and his words are aligned with each other. You stop really thinking about whether or not he is consistent, whether or not he has shown that he wants to commit, whether or not he has shown that he is doing whatever it is that needs to be done for him to be a good husband and good father. So becoming financially stable if he's not there yet, or if he's at financial stability, working on the long term, saving up for, when he has a family, saving up for a house, thinking about his retirement, those common sense decisions that a leader, a head of household would be thinking about. You get caught up in the love bombing instead and commit to someone who is either A, not truly committed to you, as was the case with my friend, or B, wants to commit to you, but is not in a place in his life where he can do that, whether it is finances or whether it has nothing to do with the money he makes, but maybe he's emotionally unavailable. He comes from a wounded childhood, or he never got over the heartbreak of another relationship and he hasn't put in that work to heal, which means he's not going to be a great partner to you. You cannot make these types of commitments, whether it is I'm trying to think of the best word for this, whether it is a commitment that is tangible, that's the word I'm looking for, whether it's a tangible commitment, so, signing a lease together and moving in together, or marriage, or whether it's a commitment in your mind where you are so hung up on this one person and you delete all other options without really taking the time to think about this relationship, whether or not it's truly aligned with what you want and whether or not this is somebody who can support you. The third problem with this whole idea of stay-at-home girlfriends is if you're in a situation like this, typically you have no leverage. So if you are in a situation where you are dating someone and they sweep you off your feet, they bomb you, they move you in, they pay for everything, and then you do frankly dumb stuff like dropping out of school or deciding not to go to school or quit your job, and you're not married to this person, they hold all the control. They hold all the cards in the relationship. Everything is going to be on his terms. So you either have to agree to his terms, do everything the way that he wants, or you face being put out in the cold. And even if you do everything on his terms, even if you agree to everything he says, even if you submit 100%, then he could still, on a whim, decide that he's ready to move on. He's ready to have someone else. He's ready to see someone else. Which means that you will end up putting up with a lot of things that are far below your boundaries and far below your standards in order to try to make a relationship work with someone who isn't nearly as committed to you as you are to them. And that brings me to my final point. Marriage has consequences. Because I hear this one all the time. I hear women say all the time, well, it's not a big deal if I don't get married. It's not a big deal if, we don't have a wedding or whatever. Marriage is just a piece of paper. First of all, you know what else is just a piece of paper? Your birth certificate is just a piece of paper. If you're in the United States, your social security card is just a piece of paper. Your college degree is just a piece of paper. Your driver's license is just a piece of paper. But people find those things important, don't they? Same with a marriage license. It has consequences. It confers benefits. It confers certain rights that unmarried people do not have. And when we talk about the idea of being a stay-at-home girlfriend and then that relationship ending for whatever reason it ends. And I want to emphasize that point right now because I know I've been talking very negatively. It doesn't have to be a matter of the man is an a-hole and decides to just leave you in the cold and bring in another woman. This could be a relationship where the man was a nice guy, but the two of you just realize that you aren't aligned and you end it for that. You naturally grow apart. It doesn't have to be anything dramatic or cataclysmic that happens to end the relationship. But if it does in fact end and the two of you are not married and you were in a position where during this time you did not work, so you don't have money saved up, you don't have a rainy day fund, an emergency fund, then the difference would be if you had been married to him, you might get spousal support, alimony. Look, love is a beautiful thing, and I wish love and romance for you so much. I truly do. At the same time, if you want healthy love, you have to be intentional about it. You have to be a little strategic about it. And it is not at all a wise decision to allow someone that much access to you, to move in with them, live with them, to be in a position where they get access to you 24/7 and they get it on their terms without them making the big commitment that they should make, the commitment to marry you, to make a commitment not just to you, but to the world, to God. Marriage is a societal thing as well. Getting married is professing to the entire world that this is the person that I am going to honor and love and cherish for the rest of my life. And if someone wants you around all the time, again, if they want access to your heart, your soul, and your body, and they want that access all of the time, then they should be willing to make the real true commitment to that and not just, oh, I'll move you in because it's convenient. And when I get bored with you, whatever, what are you going to do about it? That is not the type of situation that you want to set yourself up for. So I hope you enjoyed my story time. And I also hope that you took some insights away from this conversation. And if you did, I would love for you to share those with me. So I'm on Instagram and on TikTok at Keshia Rice, KESHIA RICE. And I would love to know, what is your greatest takeaway from this episode? Feel free to screenshot it, screen record the part that you found to be most insightful, and let's continue the conversation on social media. I will talk to you soon. I love you so much, and thank you for listening. Hey there. So you made it all the way to the end of the episode, which means I have two things to say. One, thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. And two, you like me. You really like me. So I would appreciate it if you would show that like by subscribing to this podcast so that more people can hear about it and enjoy it as much as you do. And if you want to know more about any of the links that I mentioned on this episode or any guests that I've had, be sure to go to KeshiaRice.com/links. That's KESHIARICE.com/links. I can't wait to talk to you again in the next episode. So see you then.